to make a slow build work, you have to build, and someone always has to be moving forward. So as they start to fall in love and understand each other better, they realize one of us wins and one of us loses. Just seeing how much depth they brought into the quiet moments of this movie, I think that's what I love the most.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Heart in Motion podcast. I'm so excited to welcome Sarah M. Eden to the podcast. Hi, Sarah. How are you doing?
Hi, doing really good.
So excited to talk to you about a couple of movies that we've got out on Amazon Prime right now. I think one of them is at Fandango and one of them may be coming to Fandango. Is that correct?
Yeah, the second one is supposed to release on Fandango this week, actually. So, yeah, very, very soon.
Awesome. So, for those of you that are joining, Sarah is a screenwriter. She's also a USA Today best-selling author. Sarah has written 88 historical novels and has sold over 1 million copies worldwide. So, we have so many fun things to talk about. I was so excited to find Seeking Persephone just recently over on Amazon. Got to talk with Jake, who plays the Duke
He's
in that
great.
movie,
Yeah.
and absolutely loved it. I love a good historical period drama. I'm that person
Yeah.
who I have a history major. I love a good romance, but I don't make time to read a book that is fiction unless I'm sitting on a beach. That is my sacred
Yeah.
little time. So
Right.
um, I'm hoping that one day I can just sit on the beach all day, every day, and just like read the book. So for
Right.
me, finding your work came through finding Seeking Persephone on
Yeah.
Amazon. And of course, I have several friends who follow my podcast who reached out to me immediately. One of them said, I've read every Sarah M. Eden book there is.
Wow, that's an
So
accomplishment.
he has read them all. So I'm so excited to get to know you a little bit better and talk about both of these projects. So for those that are just finding you on either Amazon Prime or Fandango through either one of these projects, like what is a Sarah M. Eden book at its core?
Yeah, when you've written so many, it can sometimes feel hard to just encapsulate them all because they are fairly different. But I think at their core, most of the books I write are romance, but even if they aren't, they're always about people connecting with each other. They're about love in all its forms, the love of friends, of family, of communities, as well as, romantic love usually plays a role in it as well. It's about people growing and learning and wanting to be better and do better. At their heart, I think they're stories of hope, regardless of the genre that they're in. I think that's what sits at the heart of most of my stories.
Got it. Well, when I watched Seeking Persephone, my tagline for this podcast is celebrating stories that move us. And this movie was exactly one of those.
Yeah.
And so I definitely wanted to connect with you on that. So you've written, 88 books across the Regency and those Western settings. So what made Seeking Persephone and the Sheriffs of Savage Wells the right ones to move from a book to the screen?
Yeah, with Seeking Persephone, it's the first in a whole universe of books, so it makes sense to start at the beginning, as it were. It's a retelling of the myth of Hades and Persephone, which is often referred to as sort of the original Beauty and the Beast,
Yeah.
and that's a story trope that we recognize so well and so easily that it makes it a very easy one to pitch and to explain. And having that makes it an easier sell, which is, of course, always important. Also, when you are just starting on a project and you're kind of trying to prove a concept, the easier it is to film, the better it is to start with. And Seeking Persephone takes place essentially in one location with very few people. So that simplified getting it off the ground. So that one made sense for so many
Yeah.
reasons
Yeah.
to start with. And Sheriff's is very similar. It's the first in its series of books. It's also, again, an easy one to pitch. It's a woman in the 1870s vying for the job of sheriff. So like there's already something interesting and new and different there, but it's also it's a more locations and more people, but it's such a fun, quirky little town that it pulls you in pretty quickly. So it made for a fun one to film. So those two made sense for different reasons, but were great places to start.
And, watching both of them now, they are, they at the core, they're very similar, but they are very different stories. And so
Yeah,
that's exciting
very.
that, both of those coming to our screens they're very different movies.
Yeah, I think it's kind of fun to even do that for the first two that I put out to be so different because it lets people know that it's not always going to be exactly the same thing. That they can
Yeah.
jump in and know that while again at the heart it's a story of hope, it's a story of people, it's a story of connections. They're going to be a little different
Well,
because I like to tell a variety of stories, and that's a
yeah.
fun way to get things off the ground.
So I'm curious, like, was this your idea to bring these to the screen, or did somebody say, "Hey, I love your books and we would love to turn them into movies"? Like, what were those initial conversations like?
Yeah, about, I think we're at almost 13 years ago now. John Lied, who is the director, and he's also like, he and I are kind of the co-creators of this. He sent me a text out of the blue. It's like, you don't know me, but this is who I am. I just read one of your books. I think they'd make great movies. We should talk. And so, way back then, we first started talking about it. The timing wasn't right. It didn't move forward at that point, but we both kind of kept track of each other as the years went on.
Yeah.
And then about 3.5 years ago, we both kind of were noticing, we just felt like the time was right. Like we were seeing this resurgence in historical romance. We both had more years under our belts, which, kind of helps you have a better idea what you're doing, and reached out and said, hey, I think we should try. We should jump into this and see if we can do it. And that's how Seeking Persephone got going. And it was while we were on set filming Seeking Persephone, and I was talking to our gaffer. And we were all having so much fun on set. And he said to me, just kind of an offhand comment, it'd be sure be fun to do a Western. It's too bad you don't have a Western. And I thought to myself, I do have a Western. So I thought about it for the rest of that day's shooting. And as we were wrapping for the day, I said to him, I said, I have a whole Western series. And it kind of blew his mind a little bit. I found out when I came back the next day for filming that he had ordered Sheriffs that night and wanted to read it because he was excited. And
Yeah.
from that point forward, it was in my mind, we should do a Western. And yeah, started working on that screenplay pretty quickly thereafter. And yeah, just got the ball rolling.
That's amazing. So I was talking when I was visiting with Jake about Seeking Persephone, and he talked about the number of pages in the book. And, going from a book with that many pages to our
Yeah,
screen, there's obviously things that have to be cut. But I'm
have to be.
curious,
Yeah.
like for you, when you have this book that's in a way, I'm sure your baby, what is it that you're like, these things they have to be preserved? Like they have to translate to the screen as well. Like where can you be flexible and what has to stay?
Yeah, for me, when I work on an adaptation, I sit down and really, really try to encapsulate in just a couple sentences what the heart of the story is. What is it that makes this story what it is? What
Mhm.
sits at the core? And that has to be preserved. Everything that's kept has to contribute to that. And anything that's cut can't take away from it. And that's where I start. And then I go through, and because I'm very much a planner, I'm very much a plotter, I'm very methodical about things, I work out a plot structure. What has to be there for this to make sense? What has to happen for this moment to be built up to correctly? And what can we combine to make it work? And doing that helps you start to narrow things down. And we got it to where I felt like we had gotten rid of anything that I don't want to say would be fluff because it's not in a book. In a
Yeah.
book, it's a totally different medium, but it was still way too long. And that's where things start to get brutal, where you have to step back and say, if I don't do this, there won't be a movie. So what do I cut? And it was a process. I learned they tell you, as an author, you have to get really good at deleting your own words because it's the only way to edit.
Yeah.
That is even more true when you're adapting to a screenplay. So much has to come out, and you have to learn to kind of let go of it. But yeah, I think it's knowing what's at the heart of the story, and then what has to be there for the story to still make sense. And I think it's actually helped me a lot as a writer of novels as well, because
Yeah.
if you have to step back and evaluate a story saying what is absolutely 100% necessary to this, I start catching myself thinking, this probably doesn't have to be here. and cutting it. So I think it's made me a more precise writer in novel form as well, which I wasn't anticipating, but I'm grateful
Yeah.
for. We can all use improvement. So yeah, that's kind of I think where it comes down to what makes this story special, and that's what you don't get rid of.
Interesting. So, did it ever with either of these get to that point where even like whether it was budget or logistics, you're like, that's going to have to go because of this? Because I imagine those were tough
Yeah.
decisions as well.
Yeah, sometimes it was a matter of like we just have to cut length or we don't have the budget for this location. So do we get rid of everything that happens there or do we try putting it somewhere else? Or yeah, those when you're getting down to that kind of nitty-gritty is tough. And then even after it's filmed, you go through the editing process. And so you
Mhm.
think I have this final like story and what it's going to be. And then as you're going through editing, sometimes nope, that needs to come out. And it just yeah you're learning to let things go so that you can have something really great in the end. And it's been a good lesson, but not an easy one.
Yeah, yeah. So, speaking first about seeking Persephone, this is such an interesting story to me because I think, like a lot of my audience, they watch a lot of Hallmarks, they watch a lot, in that kind of genre. And so often, especially when we get into series pieces, you're going to find, that slow burn type of trope. And in a way, this one had that. I mean, we're looking at four different, we'll say episodes,
Yeah.
40-ish minutes a piece. And there's this quiet, kind of like restrained intimacy between the two of these. And the way that it is written, it's like you would think that when you think slow burn or whatever, it's like, what if we lose the audience? But somehow you guys are able to just keep us pulled into that. So, talk about like what drew you to telling that type of a romance. Because I mean, I was telling Jake, I watched the first one and I'm like, I think I really like this. And by the time I got to the second one, I was like, I'm sold, I'm
I'm
in,
in.
I'm sucked in. But it's such a quiet, slow burn type of a storyline.
Yeah. Yeah. I think part of what is so necessary for that is to give the viewer someone that they are cheering from the beginning, and that's Persephone. We want her to be happy. We see immediately who she is and what is important to her and what she's fighting for. And because we see that and we're all in with her, we want to see her happy. And so that's what gets you going immediately. And then bringing in, the love interest we hope she'll end up with, for it to not be just a very sudden, oh, they're in love, something strange happens, nope, now they're together, those kind of quick things that go, for it to be more slow burn. We have to see glimpses of that happy ever after. We see glimpses of why he's not who we seem to think he is. We see glimpses of why they could be happy. And it's those glimpses that get you through that beginning. And then you see more and more of them, and that keeps you going. I think a lot of it is the direction that it builds. Um, like they're constantly moving forward, but not at the same rate and not together. So we
True.
see him start to fall a little bit more, but she's still hesitant. And so now we're cheering for him and, for her to catch up with there. And then as she starts to catch up, something happens and he pulls back. And so we're still moving in the right direction. We're still moving toward that happy ending, but someone is always trying to catch up. I think people get frustrated when neither of them are moving forward
Mhm.
or we don't see reasons why they should. So, to make a slow build work, you have to build, and someone always has to be moving forward. And that's the balance that can be hard to strike, but that's what we aimed for and hopefully pulled it off.
Well, yeah. I mean, you mentioned, rooting for Persephone, and I found myself, you talk about the whole Beauty and the Beast background, and, you're dealing with the beast. But even from the beginning, like we get glimpses of the goodness of him, and we
Yes.
want to root for him as well. So I totally get that, they may be moving forward at different paces,
Right.
but I found myself rooting for them both equally in different
Yeah.
ways.
Exactly. That's a tough thing with the Beauty and the Beast trope. If you make the Beast character too horrible and there's no redeeming qualities because you think that's going to add more tension, we just aren't cheering for them to be together because
Yeah.
even if you care about her, you don't want her to be miserable. So we have to see glimpses early on that there's more there than we think there is. And I think he has to be the one, if the Beast is, characters, he has to be the first one we see grow. And that's what we did in this.
So, we see, right? I do think, we've got several of those period dramas, romances that are out there. Many of them, I would say, are more like high energy than this one. But I'm curious, like, for you, do you see Seeking Persephone as offering a different kind of viewing experience than something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And we set out to make it different, not in a like contradictory way or something that, dismisses the value of that. To me, it's more like it's balance. If you want a balanced meal, you have to have some of everything. And so
Yeah.
we know there's lots of more high drama romances out there, some that are a little more high energy and fast paced. You have some that are quicker and more we use the word formulaic, and I don't mean that in a bad way, because that's what we're looking for there. So this filled a niche that we felt like also should be there because people long for it. It's a breath, really. It's a story that's allowed to breathe in a world that's so fast paced and so chaotic. We feel like there are people who want to have something they can turn to when the world doesn't allow them to breathe. They need something that gives them permission to, and that's what this is. It's quiet and it's comfort and it's a breath, and that I think can help balance all of that out. So yeah, we wanted to add to what's there by offering something that fills a slightly different need, so that there's all of that to offer.
Yeah. So, speaking of this slow burn, I'm curious for you as the writer, what were some of those, if we can kind of share with the audience, not to give the story away, but what were some of those little moments? Because, there does need to be that movement, but with each of them where you're like, oh, there's a little nudge of movement that you really like about this story.
Yeah, I think one of the very first ones we ever get comes from Adam. That's the Duke. He's our beast character, as it were. He goes to check on Persephone. I think it's only the second night she's there. Her family's just left. He's had a conversation with his best friend, who kind of called him to task for not being as empathetic as he probably should be. So he goes in to check on her, and all we've really seen from him at this point is grumpiness and I don't even want to do this. And he starts to leave and realizes it's a little cold. He just gets a blanket, sets it on her, and then adjusts it to make sure it's okay, and then still leaves with his, determined step. So he's still him. He hasn't totally opened up, but we have a moment where we realize there is a kindness in him that we haven't seen, and he's willing to show it to her. So I think that's our first real moment of hope from him, and that's huge.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so like that's an important one. I don't know, it's not necessarily the first one from her, but when she reaches out to his friend, and because she knows that he knows her new husband better than anyone, asks him, like, what's the history here? How is it that you like him so much? You're a good person, I can tell. I like being around you. You're kind. You're his best friend. There has to be a reason. Tell me more about him. So we see for the first time, she's not just going to give up and spend the rest of her life in misery. She wants to understand him. And that tells us there's hope here because she's going to work toward it. And she believes there has to be something redeemable. So it's those little moments that just build on each other where we see more and more that they're going to try. And I think they're great. That's the kind of love story I love
I know.
reading and watching, where you watch it and go, "Ooh, there's that
A little bit.
glimmer." And
Yes.
you just, yeah, you want to hold on to that.
So, can you talk a little bit more about that best friend? Because, this is the first in a series. So, I know
Right.
that there's a story that comes about him. I loved the best friend for both of them. I loved how
Yes.
honest he was with Adam and would
Hmm.
remind him, but his, even as a best friend, sticking with him even when he kept being pushed away. Their dynamic was so fun to watch, but also how he just embraced Persephone right from the beginning, and it's like he saw right away that
Yeah.
they were perfect for each other. So can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about the best friend?
Yeah, his name's Harry. I love him to pieces. When I was first writing the book, I knew that without someone there to bridge the gap and someone there to show the reader there has to be more to this guy, this isn't a romance, it's a tragedy.
Yeah.
So I knew we had to have someone there. And so I really stepped back and thought, who could that be? Who would stick with this absolute grumpy, unapproachable guy who keeps everyone intentionally at such a distance? And I knew it had to be someone who'd known him forever because he would have seen things that happened in his life. He would have seen more of him because they'd been around for so long. So that's when the idea of a childhood best friend who'd become like a brother. And that's where he came from. But I also needed him to be such a foil because it made sense that he would be, that he would find humor in it all, that he would be able to laugh at it. And the fact that Adam keeps him around tells you Adam can also see the humor in a lot of what's going
Mhm.
on. The fact that he can joke about Adam's fearsomeness tells you that it isn't 100%, I don't want to say authentic, but that he does that, Adam does it on purpose. Otherwise, Harry wouldn't find it funny. So that's so important for us to understand him and to believe there's more to him while we're waiting for him to reveal that. We also needed someone who would, like you said, embrace Persephone. So I knew someone who would stick with Adam through his whole life, through all the grumpiness, through all the pushing away, would embrace her immediately because he's not someone who gives up on people. And so that's really where Harry came from. He's there to be both a foil and a complement and to give us insights that we wouldn't get otherwise. He really is the one who saves their marriage.
Yeah.
Um, and so the next book, he gets his own chance at his own happy ever after. And that's, of course, just delightful because we all love Harry.
Do you have hopes and dreams for that to become a movie as well?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We would love to be able to do the entire series. It's actually two series that intersect with each other. We'd like to be able to do them all. I think we're all
Yeah.
holding our breath and crossing our fingers because
Yes.
it'd be fun to tell them all.
So I know this has got to be impossible to do, but you go from book to screen. Once it gets translated to the screen and you go back and you watch it, do you have any favorite moments that you see the way that it's been translated to the screen that you're just so proud of?
I think the ones that have been the most fun for me are the moments that weren't like a lot of times it's the way the actors acted a moment or unspoken things that they did that while they weren't in the script, they're so perfect. They're sometimes they were even things that are in the book that they didn't necessarily know that, but they understood the characters so much, just little gestures and little exchanges. I feel like it's a testament to how great our actors were for sure and how great our director's vision is that to me it all works even if something was cut out of the book, there are other moments that pull that same emotional depth into it. I love watching them slowly get to know each other. I love that Jake picked up on the way in which Adam doesn't look at Persephone. He does, just not when she's looking at him, and he understood that so well that
So
it
well.
works and we see it. And the amount of depth of emotion that Ryan was able to bring to Persephone, because she could either come across as someone who never stops crying, or someone who's too like timid, just and weak to stand up for herself, and neither of those is true of Persephone. So I think just seeing how much depth they brought into the quiet moments of this movie, I think that's what I love the most because it was the trickiest part to pull off, and they knocked it out of the park. So proud of what they did there.
I was very impressed with their work, not only them as individuals, but their chemistry together and
Yeah,
it wasn't overpronounced. It was just like they knew how to read each other in a way, was
yeah,
so fun to watch as a viewer. So
absolutely. Yeah, they're incredible. The whole cast, the whole crew, they were all just amazing. I really lucked out to make my tiptoe into this industry with such an incredible group of people. It's been amazing.
yeah. So Ryan is not only in Seeking Persephone, but she is also your lead in The Sheriffs of Savage Wells. So
She is.
vastly different movie. We've
Yeah.
talked about a Western.
Mm-hmm.
So Paisley is her character, and she's already doing the job before she's even recognized for it. And by that, she
Right.
is the sheriff, the
Mm-hmm.
interim, we'll say, of Savage Wells.
Yes.
So what drew you to this kind of a story?
I first came across an account in history. I like to read about history for fun. It's just what I do with
I
my free
get
time.
it. I get
Yeah,
it.
I know you do. I love it. I came across an account of a woman it was in the 1870s. I think it was actually in Wyoming, might have been Colorado, but it was that general area, whose father was the sheriff, but he had grown ill, and she stepped up and did the job in his place for a little while. But then when he got better, she couldn't keep it because everyone was like, well, she's a woman. And she's like, but I just did it.
Yeah.
And so that triggered this thought of what if someone had been doing it and then still had to prove themselves? Like, what would that look like? What would be the challenges of that? And that's where this grew out of, that she'd been doing the job, should have been able to keep doing the job, but instead they make her compete for it. And it was such a great premise of an opportunity for fun moments, but also character growth and exploring, something I think we all experience where it's not just trying to prove to other people that you're good enough, but I think what's at the heart of it is proving it to yourself. And that's really, I think, the journey she goes on, is learning to value herself, even if other people don't. And that's, I think, a familiar journey to most of
Oh,
us.
yeah, for sure. So,
Yeah.
how often would you say with the books that you've written, you pull from a real life inspiration like you did in this one? Does that happen very
A
often?
lot of the time, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll come across a story, usually from history, and the thought is always, what would it have been like if?
Yeah.
Or what if someone like this were present for that? Or what would it be like to come up against that expectation or that law? So yeah, it happens. It happens a lot. I
Yeah.
think history is fascinating, and too often when we look back at it, we think, oh, it's just old timey things. They were so different from us. They had so many different worries, and it's just not true. People are people and always have been. And I think that's one of the things that's most fascinating to me about history, is how much of ourselves we see in people
Hmm.
of the past,
Hmm.
because it's the same. People are the same throughout time and place and culture.
Same types of problems, completely, different, but at the same time, at the core.
Yeah, circumstances might be different, but at their core, people want
Yeah.
to be loved and they want to be seen and they want to
Hmm.
do good and they want to know how to proceed. And we deal with troubles and want to get to the other side of them. Like, at our heart, it's the same.
Yeah. So Paisley's presented with a little bit of a problem. She's got to prove that she can do the job that she's already been doing. We've got
I know.
an incoming sheriff who has a history. People know him. He does a
Mhm.
good job. He's, you know, interested in this position for reasons, we'll kind of keep that secret, but there's a reason why he
Right.
wants this job. I love their dynamic. There's a little bit of competition going on there,
Hmm.
a little bit of rivalry, but there's also a level of respect, I think,
Yeah.
among both of them. So, what makes that kind of relationship compelling to write?
Yeah, I thought it would be very, very fun to write exactly that. Because we go to like enemies to lovers trope, is it happens all the time, but too
Yeah.
often they start out literally despising and mistreating each other to the point that you're like, this is awful.
You're not wanting to root for it, right?
Exactly. And then all of a sudden, in the last 5 pages, they're suddenly in love, and you think, no, they're going to kill each other. This is not
It's
great,
not gonna
right?
last.
Right? So, exactly. So, I wanted enemies who started out not as enemies, but more like rivals, but
Mhm.
always respected each other. Because I love that as the foundation, but I also wanted it to where they both wanted and needed the same thing for important reasons that we, as readers and now as viewers, understand. We recognize they both need that job, and it's crucial to both of them, but they can't both have it. So there is no easy answer. So as they start to fall in love and understand each other better, they realize one of us wins and one of us loses. And what does that mean for what we're starting to feel here? And
Yeah.
I just loved that as the foundation. And yeah, it was a fun one to explore.
I love that. I loved that, that from the beginning there is that attraction there. And I wouldn't even call it attraction at first, but that level of respect
They're
where it's
intrigued by each
they're
other
intrigued.
and they
Yes,
respect each other.
you got
Yeah.
it. You got
Yeah.
it. Whether either wants to admit it or not, it's
Yes.
there. And we
Yes,
know it's
exactly.
happening, right?
Exactly.
This story is different than Seeking Persephone in that the stakes are clearly more visible. We've got a
Mhm.
full town dynamic. I wouldn't say it's
Yeah.
louder, but it is definitely more there, right? More pronounced. So,
Right.
how did your approach shift for writing this one and bringing it to screen than Seeking Persephone?
Yeah, this one I knew would be a lot shorter. We were doing it feature film length, so a lot more had to be cut out. The original book is shorter, which helps. Um, but I knew it was going to be faster. It was more about these two people navigating this unusual, quirky town. And so the focus was a little bit different. So it was meeting these interesting people, learning about them, figuring out how they're going to work with them. It just jumped faster, which I think works great for a Western. So like it was a good approach to take. I knew it would go faster. I still wanted it to be something you could sit back with and just enjoy. It's not blaring at you all the time, but it's still just more fun, more fast paced. I love westerns, so I wanted it to lean into that vibe. But I've also often described it as like the Andy Griffith Show meets Support Your Local Sheriff. So I wanted
That's
it to be
awesome.
quirky and just these interesting, strange people that you could just kind of sit back and laugh and enjoy. So yeah, very different feel. I tell people don't go into it expecting them to be the same movie, but go into it expecting to enjoy it because it's
But
fun in its own way.
Paisley does such a good job, though, even at the beginning of telling him that, that this town is unique and that it's different. So
Yeah.
we, as an audience,
Yeah.
know from the beginning, this is just a very unique place to be. And it's
Right.
kind of setting us up for that. I
Yeah.
sort of love that, I'm drawn in to this one from the beginning on the romance side of it. But as the story goes on, the Western side, the mystery to it, it
Yeah.
continues to become, more visible and I'm going, oh, there's more than just a romance happening here, which was really fun
Yes.
to watch as well.
Yeah, I those are also my favorite kind of stories where there's definitely the romance there. You definitely want to know what's going to happen with your main couple. But romance in the real world doesn't happen in a vacuum. Romance is part of life. So those are the stories I prefer where yes, we have this romantic plot line we're following, but life is still there and
Mhm.
there's more to it and we're chasing more threads while trying to hold on to this one. I love that. And we definitely got to do that with this movie, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Both of them, both movies, felt like that we're working on identity, we're working on like who we are,
Yeah.
being truly seen. And so I'm curious, is that something that you find yourself often leaning into when you're writing?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. For me, the stories that move me the most, the stories that I'm most drawn to, are about people figuring themselves out, people learning to recognize who they are and to value who they are and to find the people in their lives who do as well, who add to that, who help them to be more of who they are and to be better and to be happier. I love exploring that because I think so much of us can relate to that. It doesn't matter where you are, where you grew up, how old you are, what your struggles are. At our heart, we're all trying to figure out who we are.
Mhm.
And that I think is it's the journey of a lifetime because we change and life changes. So it's a story we can always relate to and there's so much depth to look into there.
I'm sure, you're keeping kind of a pulse on what's working out there, what's not working. It feels like that. And I mean, maybe I'm just hearing from my audience, but that there's just a real desire right now to get back to those stories that really lean into like that emotional connection. Are you sensing that right now with the conversations that are out there?
Absolutely. I think a lot of this has to do with technology and social media, and I think there is this feeling of isolation that people experience, that we feel more disconnected to each other in a world that's more connected than it has ever been. And I think we crave that. We long for that feeling of connection, of being seen, of seeing others. And so I think more and more people are being drawn to include that in the things that they watch and the things that they read. They want stories of people connecting, people finding their people,
Mhm.
because I think we all long for that and we crave that. There's a loneliness that I sense in people. I've felt it myself in many ways. And stories can help to bridge that, not only while we're watching them, but when we realize we have enjoyed the same story that someone else has, now we're connected. There's that saying that books recommend people. When you see someone reading a book that you love, you already know that there's a connection there. And I think that stories have that power. And so
Yeah.
I lean into that because I think it's important and an amazing way to connect people in a world that feels very disconnected.
That is so true. Like the friendships that I have even made from the projects that I watch right now,
Yeah,
that I would have never known this person, never connected to this person, but we can sit
absolutely.
on the daily and have just fascinating, amazing conversations because we have found this story or stories
Yes.
that we both appreciate in a similar
Yeah,
way.
absolutely. Stories connect people. I think it's one of the most powerful things about them.
So, for those people who have watched the Sheriffs of Savage Wells and Seeking Persephone, and they're like, now what do I go find that is a Sarah M. Eden project? What is
Yeah.
maybe something that you would point them to check out now?
Yeah, well, like we said, I have 88 books. I will have, I think, 94 by the end of the year. So
Oh
like
my goodness.
they keep coming. I have another film in pre-production that we're gonna be filming later this year. So there's lots and lots and lots that's gonna be coming. My books are all very different from each other. You know, if you like Westerns, I have Westerns, I have time travel, I have ghost stories, I have straightforward historical romances everywhere from the late 1700s through the late Victorian. Like they're all over the place. So I usually send people either to my website or you can see all my books listed on Amazon or bookshop.org. Look through them, see what story sounds interesting to you because there are lots and lots. And you can find me on social media, which is where I post about upcoming projects and more things. And I have a newsletter where I recommend both my books and other people's books that I find interesting. So lots and lots of ways to get more and more stories because I love stories. The power there is incredible, and I think that's what I spend the rest of my life doing is just recommending stories.
Absolutely. Well, for anybody that's listening or watching, if you have read one of Sarah's books, drop it in the comment, a book that you really enjoyed that would, get the word out and encourage others to check it out. So,
Fantastic.
where can people follow you on social media to stay up to date on book recommendations and your projects?
Yeah, Instagram's probably where I'm the most active. You can find me there, Sarah underscore M underscore Eden. Uh,
Okay.
we all often have to put dots and underscores in over there. Also, just my website, sarahem.eden.com. You can sign up for my newsletter. You can find links to all kinds of things there. It's a great way to keep on top of it.
Okay, well, I want to remind everybody that you can watch both of these projects on Amazon Prime right now, and they can watch them in the US and in the UK as
And
well.
in the UK currently,
Okay.
yes. Every market's its own thing, so we kind of wait for it to be picked up in that market and released,
Okay.
but we'll shout it from the rooftops as soon as it shows up anywhere else.
Absolutely. And then following her, she will get that out there. You will know. And then
Absolutely.
Fandango, you can watch Seeking Persephone as well on Fandango, right?
Yes, and Sheriff's is supposed to show up there sometime in the next week or so.
Soon, soon.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for chatting with me.
Yeah,
I
anytime.
just love that I found these projects. I'm intrigued, I'm hooked, I'm ready to get on to the next project. Can't wait to see what you've got in the works coming up.
Awesome.
We'll be watching, but thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, bye bye.